heavy metal song was a cover made by Blue Cheer of the song Summertime Blues in 1958. Originally interpreted by Eddie Cuthbert. Regarding the criticisms, the one who designed the term heavy metal to a musical genre was the critic Lester Bangs for Cream magazine, who were the founding bands of metal. Until today, there is no precise consensus of who was the first heavy metal band. Some mention Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, while others leave that seat exclusively to Black Sabbath. At the same time, in the 60s and early 70s, many bands that did not have the same media impact that they mentioned were also a contribution to the birth of the genre, such as UFO, Blue Cheer, Wishbone Ash, among others. Later, groups such as Scorpions, Rainbow, Judas Priest, and Motorhead include some punk elements in the genre, giving it a new emphasis of aggressiveness and speed. In the second half of the 70s, and at the age of punk, the new wave of British heavy metal emerged, commonly abbreviated as NWOBHE, led by Iron Maiden, Saxon, and Deep Leppard, and of which the very influential Venom were part, which gave a new value to the genre, leading to the birth of a subgenre, leading a lead of the new subgenre. How the metal evolved. In the mid and late 70s, more and more bands were emerging. But another genre was gaining ground, that was the punk. Unfortunately, this did not prevent bands like Iron Maiden or Saxon from appearing. But another subgenre that was gaining ground was the thrash metal. That as the thrash metal that gained a great popularity for the called Big Four. The Big Four are Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. But back in the 2000s, the metal made that new bands appear with new genres like the djent, the metalcore, the nu metal, or even more. The heavy metal and the silence of the media. Despite its success among an important part of the young, the media, especially the television, want to belittle, if not to peddle, this musical style, because a music that usually appeals to injustice or critical thinking could be dangerous if it is spread among the youth. So, better if they dedicate to better this musical style and give more popularity to other mainstream genres, even if they apologize for things that are not too good, like the drugs, the machismo, and even the gender violence. I'm not saying that everything that is heavy metal is good and virtuous. Are also, especially in some extreme styles, bands or songs that usually appeals to the satanism, the violence, or things like that. There are stars like Bruce Dickinson, singer of Iron Maiden, that are university doctors, entrepreneurs, or international speakers. Most of the bands have, for the most part, are good and virtuous, and have another work instead of the music. And they also have a great complexity, a great technical complexity in their music. The lyrics and the message. At this point, I can give a lot of examples of great lyrics of metal, but I'm gonna mention a classic band and a new band that still to these days have a lot of fans. For example, Master of Puppets by Metallica. It's a very popular song of the band, and this song is not satanist as many think. It talks about the drugs and how this control you even at the point you can live without the drugs. So you will be the puppet and the drugs the master. Critical acclaim by Alex. In this song, the use of war to sustain the lifestyle of the American politician is criticized, and how the country don't help his inhabitants to improve. It even blames its inhabitants all the fault that is happening to his country. The relation with the classical music. At the beginning, the metal have a strong relationship with the classical music. Even the critic Robert Walser, he's the biggest influence on the genre. For the most part, the guitarist, for the great complexity of some chords, and develop the virtuosity of these musicians. In an article written for Groove Music Online, Walser mentions, the 80s brought a generalized adaptation of the chord practice of European models of the 18th century, especially of the Johann Sebastian Bach and Antonio Vivaldi. The guitarist Richie Blackmore of Deep Purple has been considered the first interlocutor between the classical music and metal, being concerto for group and orchestra, the first studio production that you need an orchestra and a rock group. Later, Jason Becker, Ulti Young, Meredith Friedman, Eddie Van Halen, among others, give a new emphasis on the genre and give a new value, giving the birth of a new subgenre called symphonic metal, and being Metallica, Kiss, being that they produce a CD or a studio production with an orchestra. For example, Metallica made the S&M disc. The different genres of metal and their origin. The thrash metal. It emerged in the early 80s under the influence of the speed metal, and it burned in an underground scene, but then achieved a great popularity in United States, mainly in San Francisco Bay, that is actually known as the Bay Area thrash metal. Their sound is characterized by being faster and more aggressive, with mainly lyrics that fight with social issues, and great popularity with Metallica and Megadeth, that in the Billboard chart 200 give very record certifications. Death metal. This extreme movement emerged in the mid-80s as an evolution of the thrash metal. These characters is deep, dark, and have guttural voices, and some techniques called shriek, for example. So this genre usually in its lyrics appeals to the Satanists, the blasphemy, and violence. So this will be considered as one of the most extreme genres of metal. Its main members are Dead and Possessed, also considered as the designators of the name, for their demo Death by Metal and their song Death Metal of the album Seven Churches. The scene Death Metal was carried out in the 80s in Florida, with some bands like Sepultura or Overkill. The black metal is a subgenre like the death metal derives from thrash, so they are very similar in terms of aggressiveness and speed. The difference is that they actually do some melodies and have different tempos in their songs, not only one. Then they mix their songs with some other genres in music, like is the folk, the classical music, the electronic music, and even the avant-garde. The first wave of British metal emerged in the 80s in Europe, led by Venom, Merciful Fate, and Hellhammer and Frost. later, the Norwegians Mayhem and Burzum spearheaded the second wave, and finally, and early in that decade that followed, new bands began to appear from Canada, Germany, and Poland. France. Sorry. It emerged, the doom metal. It emerged in the mid-80s with the band Saint Vitus, The Obsessed and Trouble, and By Candlelight. This movement, unlike the other genres, had more slower tempos and more melancholic rhythms. So this will be the principal difference. And they also have gutturals, but they are not like high voices. They are only low and don't being faster than the others. According to the critics, in 1991, a new subgenre of the doom metal began to appear, which is the drone. This genre was principal led by an album called Forest of Equilibrium of the band British Cathedral. In that same period, the death doom style began to appear, which is a mix between the death metal and the doom. So here will be the birth of another subgenre of the metal. And already in the 90s, an interpret by early doom and traditional heavy metal bands give birth of a new subgenre called stoner drum metal, which is like the name. It's a mix of the three subgenres. The power metal. The power metal was a reaction for extreme movements of metal with influence of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. Because of their origins, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden are power metal. So it enjoys until today great popularity in Europe, Japan, and South America. It emerged in the mid-80s with the brings of the German band Halloween, who established from their albums a contribution of shred, which is a technique like a guttural, but high, with a high note, a melancholic approach, and some clean high voices. From the hand of Michael Kiske, and with influence, like I say, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. Other bands that also come of the first wave. Sorry, I lost.
Go on.
The first waves that emerged in the late 80s are the I Hammerfall, Blind Guardian, or Gamma Ray, and the Americans I Third. During that same decade, in the 90s, the movement generated a great popularity in Europe with the appearance of new groups such as Edguy, Shagaton, or Dragon Force, which is a very popular band of the genre, and for name a few. In addition, a new subgenre reached the concert circuit with great success in South America, from where the British Angra, the Brazilian Angra, and the Argentines Rata Blanca were born. Like many others of the subgenres of metal, various groups gave it a new attributes that gave away some new divisions. The most important of this is the progressive metal, which mixes the complexity of the progressive rock, and the principal bands of this new subgenre was Dream Theater, is the most popular of these, Glory Fades, Warning, and King Crimson. The conclusion. The metal is a musical genre that has a lot of passion behind it as an interesting origin story. And the metal could be with the time where turn more aggressive and speed, or go back to the classic metal of the 80s. So, we shall group thus all metal musicians are Satanists or drug addicts stereotypes, and give it a try. If you like if you would like to listen some new music with a new genre, definitely metal could be for you. And they are not repetitive like other mainstream genres. Like in the long run, they are boring and they are not even fun later. So I know there's a lot of people that will tell you that the metal is the only good genre you can listen and find, and you can listen another thing. Just don't hear them. Listen to the music what you want. But if you want to listen a music that still to these days it's innovating and giving more emphasis on the mixture, the texture, the creativity, and have more fun and even can leave you thinking, definitely the metal could be for you. That's metal.